The morning sun rose over the rocky landscape of Helios 9, casting long shadows across the United Earth Defense Force outpost. Staff Sergeant Joe Coleman stepped out of his quarters, breathing in the strange but not unpleasant air of the alien world. 6 months into his deployment, he was finally getting used to the slightly higher oxygen content that made everything seem just a bit brighter, a bit more intense. "Morning, Sarge," called one of the younger soldiers, waving as he passed. Joe nodded back with a small smile. He wasn't unfriendly, just reserved. Most of the other soldiers understood that he preferred quiet to the constant chatter that filled the mess hall. After 15 years of service, Joe had earned his private nature. He checked his tablet as he walked toward the communications center. A new message from command appeared on the screen. "Coordinate with local Lyrian research team on climate monitoring project, Euro 900 hours." Joe sighed. He wasn't opposed to working with the locals. In fact, he found the Lyrians fascinating. But communication was always challenging. Their language had subtle tones that human vocal cords struggled to reproduce. Still, he had been studying basic Lyrian phrases in his free time, more than most of his colleagues bothered to do. The research facility sat just a mile from the human outpost, a graceful structure that seemed to grow from the landscape itself. The Lyrians built with living materials, somehow coaxing plants to form solid permanent structures that maintained themselves. Joe always felt a sense of wonder when approaching the building. "Welcome, Sergeant Coleman," said the Lyrian guard, at the entrance. His skin had a faint blue glow that pulsed slightly as he spoke. "They are expecting you in the main laboratory." Joe tried his hand at a Lyrian greeting, carefully pronouncing the words he had practiced. "Selai Ventalu." The guard's markings brightened in what Joe had learned was a sign of pleased surprise. "Your accent improves," he said in English. The main laboratory was a large room filled with plants from all over Helios 9. Scientists moved between tables, tending to specimens with careful attention. Joe looked around, trying to determine who he was supposed to meet. "You must be the human coordinator," came a soft voice from behind him. Joe turned to find a female Lyrian standing there. Like all her kind, she had the characteristic luminescent skin, but hers had a gentle lavender tint. The natural markings on her face formed delicate patterns around her slightly larger than human eyes, which were fixed somewhere around Joe's shoulder, not meeting his gaze directly. "Yes, Staff Sergeant Joe Coleman," he said, extending his hand, then remembering too late that Lyrians didn't shake hands. He awkwardly lowered it. "I am Naya," she said, holding up a hand in the traditional Lyrian greeting, palm forward with fingers slightly spread. "I will be working with you on the climate study." She was carrying a tray of plant samples, and as she shifted to set it down, the tray tilted. Several glass containers slipped, tumbling toward the floor. Joe moved quickly, catching 2 of the containers before they hit the ground. 3 others smashed, spilling soil and plant matter across the polished floor. "I'm so sorry," Naya said, her skin flashing a deep purple that Joe recognized as embarrassment. "No problem," Joe said, handing back the saved samples. "Accidents happen." Together they knelt to clean up the mess. Joe noticed how carefully Naya handled even the broken plants, gently gathering each fragment. "You care a lot about them," he observed. Naya nodded, her eyes still avoiding his. "Each one is alive. They deserve respect." As they cleaned, Joe noticed, her hands trembling slightly. He wondered if she was nervous around humans or if it was just him. Many Lyrians were still cautious around Earth military personnel, even though they were officially allies. "So," Joe said, trying to ease the tension, "what exactly will we be monitoring?" Naya seemed grateful for the change of subject. "The seasonal storms are changing, more electric activity coming earlier each year. It affects communication systems, yours and ours. We need to understand why." Her English was good, with an accent that made ordinary words sound musical. Joe found himself wanting to hear more. When they finished cleaning, Naya led him to a workstation covered with monitoring equipment. "These sensors will be placed at key points around both facilities," she explained. We track atmospheric changes, electrical patterns, and plant responses. Plant responses? Joe asked. For the first time, Naya's eyes briefly met his before darting away again. Yes, plants here are sensitive to electrical fields. They change color before storms. Early warning system. That's incredible, Joe said, genuinely impressed. Our technology could learn from your plants. A hint of a smile crossed Naya's face and her skin glowed a bit brighter. Joe realized he enjoyed seeing that reaction. They spent the morning reviewing maps and planning sensor placements. By midday, Joe found himself relaxing in Naya's company. Despite her initial nervousness, she was clearly brilliant, explaining complex ecological relationships in a way that made perfect sense. When they broke for lunch, Joe impulsively asked, "Would you like to hear some Earth music?" Naya looked surprised but nodded. Joe pulled up a playlist on his tablet, classical guitar pieces that he found calming during his deployments. As the gentle notes filled the air, Naya's eyes widened, and the luminescence of her skin pulsed in rhythm with the music. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "So different from our harmonics." "What's Lyrian music like?" Joe asked. "It's difficult to explain," she said. "Perhaps I can share some next time." "I'd like that," Joe said, surprised to realize how much he meant it. The afternoon passed quickly as they finalized their monitoring plan. When it was time for Joe to return to the outpost, he felt oddly reluctant to leave. "Same time tomorrow?" he asked. Naya nodded. "I will prepare the first sensors for deployment." As Joe walked back to the human compound, he reflected on the day. Working with Naya had been unexpectedly pleasant. There was something about her careful attention to detail, her gentle way of explaining complex ideas, that he found appealing. The next morning, Joe found a small cluster of native flowers placed near the entrance to the outpost. They were unlike any he had seen before, delicate blue petals that seemed to catch the light in unusual ways. "Someone left these," said Private Martinez, on guard duty. "Local stuff. Pretty, though." Joe examined the flowers closely. "Any idea who?" Martinez shrugged. "Saw a Lyrian walking away about an hour ago. Didn't get a good look." Throughout the day, Joe wondered about the flowers. When he met with Naya to begin placing sensors around the perimeter of both compounds, he mentioned them casually. "Oh," she said, her skin flashing that now familiar purple. "Those are called Kelhara. They symbolize new beginnings." "They're beautiful," Joe said. "A nice gesture from whoever left them." Naya seemed about to say something more, but instead turned her attention to the sensor they were installing. Joe noticed that her hands were shaking again. Over the next few weeks, Joe and Naya fell into a comfortable routine. Each morning, they would meet to check the sensors and analyze the data. Joe began to recognize the subtle changes in Naya's luminescence that indicated her moods. Bright yellow when excited about a discovery, soft blue when contemplative, and occasionally that flash of purple embarrassment that appeared whenever. He complimented her work. What Joe didn't understand was why fresh flowers continued to appear at the outpost entrance every few days. Different varieties, but always carefully arranged. "It's a Lyrian thing," explained Corporal White when Joe asked. "My buddy in xenoanthropology says they communicate through symbols a lot." "But what does it mean?" Joe wondered. White shrugged. "No idea. Maybe it's just being neighborly." One evening, as a distant storm flickered on the horizon, Joe found himself staying late at the Lyrian facility, helping Naya calibrate a particularly sensitive instrument. The lab was quiet, most of the other researchers having left for the day. "Your people value directness," Naya said, suddenly breaking a comfortable silence. "I suppose we do," Joe replied, looking up from the sensor readout. "Lyrians. We prefer to let action speak," she said softly. "Words can be misunderstood." Joe nodded, sensing she was trying to tell him something important. Different cultures, different ways. That's what makes working together interesting. Naya's skin pulsed gently. "Yes, interesting." She hesitated, then added, "Tomorrow will bring stronger electrical activity. The Juraka flowers are already closing their petals. Like the ones that keep appearing at our outpost? Joe asked. Naya's markings flashed bright purple, and she quickly turned away to adjust an instrument that needed no adjustment. As Joe walked back to the outpost under the alien stars, he wondered what message those flowers were meant to convey, and why the thought of Naya leaving them made him smile. 6 months passed on Helios 9. The landscape changed as the planet moved into its storm season. Dark clouds gathered more frequently on the horizon, and the air carried a constant electric charge that made human hair stand on end. Inside the communications center of the Earth outpost, Joe Coleman studied the latest message from command with a frown. Lieutenant Karen Ellis watched him from across the room. "Bad news?" she asked, walking over to his station. Joe nodded. "The Kelvin Empire is moving ships closer to this sector. Command is putting us on alert status." Lieutenant Ellis sighed. "Just what we need. Any orders?" "Prepare for possible evacuation of non-essential personnel. For now, we continue operations as normal." The lieutenant nodded, her expression serious. "And your project with the Lyrians?" "Even more important now," Joe said. "If the electrical storms interfere with our communications during a crisis." "Understood. Carry on, Sergeant." She paused. "Just remember protocols about fraternization with locals." Joe felt his face grow warm. "It's strictly professional, Lieutenant." Ellis gave him a knowing look but said nothing more as she walked away. The truth was more complicated. Over the past months, Joe's daily meetings with Naya had become the highlight of his routine. What started as simple data collection had evolved into something Joe couldn't quite define. They now spent hours together, often working in comfortable silence or engaging in what they called language exchange. That afternoon, Joe made his way to the Lyrian research facility as usual. The sky looked threatening, with dark clouds building. In the distance, Naya was waiting at the entrance, her skin glowing a soft blue that Joe had come to associate with concern. "The storm comes earlier than expected," she said in greeting. "My instruments show unusual patterns." Joe nodded. "We should check the sensors on the eastern ridge. They were showing anomalies this morning." As they walked together toward the ridge, Naya asked, "Have you practiced the phrases I taught you?" Joe smiled. "Vela tarin sumelar," he said carefully, pronouncing each syllable. Naya's skin brightened. "Very good. Your accent is improving." "What does it mean again? Something about weather?" "It means the sky speaks with light and sound," Naya explained. "It's what we say during storm season to remind ourselves that danger can also bring understanding." Joe considered this. "I like that idea. On Earth, we just complain about the weather." Naya made a sound that Joe had learned was Lyrian laughter, a soft, musical trill. He found himself trying to make her laugh more often. They reached the ridge where one of their sensor arrays was placed. Dark clouds had gathered directly overhead, and the air felt heavy with electricity. "The reading is much stronger than yesterday," Naya said, checking the device. "This is not normal for early season." Joe checked his tablet. "Our base readings are spiking too. Maybe we should head back before—" A brilliant flash cut him off as lightning struck a nearby rock formation. The boom was immediate and deafening. Both Joe and Naya were thrown to the ground by the shock wave. Joe recovered first, his ears ringing. "Naya, are you okay?" She sat up slowly, her skin pulsing erratically. "I am unharmed, but we must seek shelter quickly." Another flash lit the sky, closer this time. They grabbed the sensor equipment and ran toward a small cave in the ridge that they had noted during previous surveys. Inside the cave, they caught their breath as rain began to fall in heavy sheets, obscuring the view outside. Thunder rumbled continuously. "The storm is directly above us," Naya said, setting up the sensor to continue readings from their shelter. "We may be here for some time." Joe radioed the outpost to report their situation. "Lieutenant Coleman here. Sheltering in. Cave system on Eastern Ridge with Lyrian researcher Naya. We'll wait out the storm." "Understood, Sergeant," came Ellis's reply through bursts of static. "Be advised, we're getting reports of power fluctuations at the Lyrian facility." Joe looked at Naya. Your research center, could it be affected by the storm? Naya's markings flashed with alarm. Our backup systems should engage, but the specimens in the environmental chambers need constant power. She tried using her communication device but got no response. I cannot reach them. They waited anxiously for an hour, watching the storm rage outside. Finally, there was a break in the downpour. We should check on your facility, Joe said. They made their way carefully down the ridge. As they approached the Lyrian Research Center, they could see emergency lights glowing dimly. Several Lyrians were outside, their skin flickering with distress colors. Among them was a male Lyrian who bore similar markings to Naya, but with a greener tint to his luminescence. He rushed toward them when they appeared. Naya, the power systems, failed completely. The environmental chambers are down. Vax, this is Joe Coleman, Naya said quickly. Joe, my brother Vax. Vax barely acknowledged Joe. The rarest specimens are dying without the proper atmosphere. Joe followed them inside. The facility was dark except for emergency lighting. Lyrian scientists were working frantically to save plants in the main laboratory. The backup generators should have engaged automatically, Vax said. Joe asked, Can I take a look at your power system? I have some engineering training. Vax hesitated, but Naya said, Please, brother, let him help. In the power control room, Joe quickly identified the problem. Lightning strike must have fried the switching mechanism. The generators are fine, but they can't connect to your grid. Working with tools borrowed from the Lyrians, Joe managed to bypass the damaged component. With a hum, power returned to the facility. In the main lab, Naya was carefully tending to plants that looked wilted and discolored. Some will not survive, she said sadly when Joe approached. I'm sorry, he said, genuinely feeling her loss. Is there anything else I can do? She shook her head. You have done much already. Thank you, Joe. Later, as the storm finally passed and stars became visible again, Joe prepared to return to the outpost. Vax approached him outside the facility. My sister speaks highly of you, he said, his tone guarded. She's brilliant, Joe replied. It's been an honor working with her. Vax studied him with large alien eyes. You should know that the Kelvin forces are closer than your people realize. I work in security. We have better monitoring systems. Joe felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. How close? Close. Enough that your people may soon leave this world, Vax said. If you care for my sister, you will be honest with her about this. Before Joe could respond, Vax walked away. Joe stood there, processing this information and what it might mean for the growing connection between him and Naya. The next day, Naya invited Joe to join her in the facility's small gathering space after their work. Other Lyrians were present, sharing a meal. It was the first time Joe had been included in such a social event. As they ate foods that were safe for human consumption, Naya explained, In our culture, sharing meals builds bonds between families and communities. We have similar customs. On Earth, Joe said, carefully trying a purple fruit that tasted like a mix of apple and cinnamon. An older female Lyrian joined them, her skin patterns more complex than any Joe had seen. Her luminescence was subdued but steady. This is my grandmother, Elder Mira, Naya said with clear respect in her voice. The elder studied Joe with calm interest. So you are the human who saved our plants. I just fixed a switch, Joe said modestly. Naya tells me you appreciate our ways, Elder Mira continued. That you learn our language. Joe nodded. Your culture has much to teach us. The elder seemed pleased. Then perhaps you would like to hear one of our stories? About the storm season and its meaning to our people? As the group gathered around, Elder Mira told an ancient Lyrian tale about two beings from different worlds who were joined by a storm, a tale of what Lyrians called soul bonds, connections that transcended physical differences. Throughout the story, Joe found himself glancing at Naya, whose skin glowed with a soft pink he had never seen before. Their eyes met briefly, and for once she didn't look away immediately. Later, walking back to the outpost under clearing skies, Joe thought about Vax's warning and the evacuation orders that might soon come. The thought of leaving Helios 9, of leaving Naya, created an unexpected ache in his chest. At the outpost entrance, fresh flowers waited, this time arranged in a complex spiral pattern. Joe carefully gathered them up, finally understanding that they were meant specifically for him and wondering if he had the courage to acknowledge what was growing between him and someone from another world. The morning alarm blared through the Earth outpost, pulling Joe from sleep. He dressed quickly and hurried to the command center where Lieutenant Ellis was addressing the gathered personnel. "The Kelvin fleet has entered the outer system," she announced, her face grim. "We have orders to begin evacuation procedures. Non-essential personnel will depart on the first transport tomorrow morning." A young soldier raised his hand. "What about the Lyrians, ma'am?" "The Lyrian government is still deciding their response to the Kelvin approach," Ellis replied. "Our orders are to secure our own people first." After the briefing, Ellis pulled Joe aside. "Coleman, you'll be on the final transport. I need your communications expertise until the end." "Understood, Lieutenant." "And Sergeant," she added more, quietly, "you should inform your Lyrian contact about the timetable. They deserve to know." Joe nodded, a heavy feeling settling in his chest. He made his way to the Lyrian facility, dreading the conversation ahead. Naya was in the communications lab, studying readouts from their sensor network. Her skin brightened when she saw him, then dimmed as she noticed his expression. "Something is wrong," she said. It wasn't a question. "The Kelvin fleet has entered the system," Joe said directly. "We're beginning evacuation procedures. Non-essential. Personnel leave tomorrow." Naya's markings pulsed with distress. "And you?" "I'll be on the final transport 3 days from now." Silence fell between them. Finally, Naya asked, "Will your people return to Helios 9? "I don't know," Joe admitted. "It depends on what happens with the Kelvins." Naya turned back to her work, her movements stiff. "Then we must complete our research while we can. I have discovered something important in the storm data." Joe moved closer to see the screen. "What did you find?" "The electrical patterns from the storms create unique interference signatures," she explained, her professional tone contrasting with the troubled flickers of her skin. "But certain native plants absorb these specific frequencies." She brought up another display showing a familiar blue flower. "The Kelhara plant somehow shields against the interference." Joe recognized the flowers that had been left for him so many times. "The same ones that—" "Yes," Naya interrupted, her skin flashing purple briefly. "They have unique properties. I believe we could use them to shield communications equipment from Kelvin detection." Joe understood the implications immediately. That could be crucial for Earth forces. Kelvins are known to track and jam communication signals. They spent the day running tests, working with an intensity fueled by the knowledge that their time was limited. Greg Phillips, a medic from the outpost, joined them to help with some of the testing equipment. During a break, Greg pulled Joe aside. "So you and the Lyrian researcher, huh?" "What do you mean?" Joe asked defensively. Greg smiled. "Come on, man. I've seen how you look at her. And those flowers she keeps leaving you? Not exactly subtle." "It's complicated," Joe muttered. "Life is complicated," Greg replied, "especially in wartime. Just don't leave things unsaid, that's my advice." By evening, they had confirmed that the Kelhara plant extract could indeed shield communications from the type of detection systems the Kelvans used. This information needed to reach Earth forces before they engaged the enemy fleet. "We need to transmit this data to command immediately," Joe said, gathering their research notes. "But with the Kelvin ships in system, they might detect a standard transmission." Naya looked thoughtful. "We could use the natural storm interference as additional cover. The seasonal pattern shows another large storm system approaching tonight." They worked late into the night, preparing both the data package and a transmission system coated with Kelhara extract. Outside, the storm clouds gathered, lightning illuminating the sky in brilliant flashes. As they finished the preparations, Vax entered the lab. "Naya, a moment, please." She stepped away to speak with her brother. Though they conversed in the Lyrian language, Joe could tell from their luminescence patterns that the discussion was intense. When Naya returned, her skin pulsed with anxiety. The Lyrian Council has decided to remain neutral in this conflict. They will not assist either side. But our research, Joe began, is my own work, Naya finished firmly. The Council does not control my personal decisions. The storm reached its peak as they prepared to transmit. Rain lashed against the building, and thunder shook the foundations. The moment had to be perfect. Enough storm interference to mask their signal from the Kelvins, but not so much that Earth forces couldn't receive it. Now, Joe said, activating the system. The equipment hummed as it sent the vital information. For a tense minute, they watched the transmission indicators. Then a confirmation signal appeared. They received it. Joe breathed in relief. Naya's skin glowed with joy, her markings forming patterns Joe had never seen before. Without thinking, he reached out and took her hand. Her skin felt warm against his, a subtle electric current seeming to pass between them. The moment was interrupted by an emergency alert from Joe's communicator. Lieutenant Ellis's voice came through. "Coleman, report back immediately. Evacuation timeline has been accelerated. All personnel departing tomorrow at 800. Joe looked at Naya, the reality of their separation suddenly immediate. "I have to go," she nodded, withdrawing her hand. "I understand." Back at the outpost, chaos reigned as soldiers packed equipment and prepared for departure. Lieutenant Ellis confirmed what Joe had feared. The successful transmission had revealed their position to the Kelvins, forcing an immediate withdrawal. Joe barely slept that night, his thoughts filled with images of Naya. In the morning, as the transport ships were loaded, he found himself constantly scanning the perimeter, hoping for one last glimpse of lavender skin. Greg found him checking communication equipment one final time. "Looking for someone?" Joe sighed. "That obvious, huh?" "You know," Greg said casually, "there's room for a few civilian specialists on these transports, scientists with valuable knowledge." "She wouldn't leave her world," Joe replied. "Her family, her research, it's all here." The final hour before departure arrived. Lieutenant Ellis was checking off personnel when a commotion at the perimeter caught their attention. Two Lyrians approached, Elder Mira and Naya. The elder walked with dignity, but Naya seemed hesitant, almost retreating with each step. "What's happening?" Ellis asked as they approached. Elder Mira spoke first. "My granddaughter has something to give your soldier." Joe stepped forward, heart pounding. Naya stood frozen, clutching something in her hands. Elder Mira whispered something to her and gently pushed her forward. With visible effort, Naya finally moved toward Joe. In her trembling hands was a small crystal container. Inside, a Kelhara flower glowed with an inner light, suspended in clear liquid. "This is," Naya began, her voice barely audible. She switched to Lyrian, the words flowing more easily in her native tongue but incomprehensible to Joe. Vax appeared at the edge of the gathering. He seemed conflicted, but after a moment, he stepped forward. "My sister asked me to translate," he said stiffly. "She says this is the essence of the Kelhara. Among our people we call it the Heartlight. It never fades, never dies, even when separated from its soil." Vax paused, looking between his sister and Joe. With a resigned sigh, he continued, "She has given you her Heartlight. Among our people, this is a declaration of love." A collective murmur went through the watching humans. Joe stood stunned, the glowing crystal warm in his hands. "The final transport leaves in 5 minutes," Lieutenant Ellis announced, breaking the silence. "All personnel, board immediately." Alarms sounded across the outpost. Joe looked at Naya, whose skin pulsed with emotions he was only beginning to understand. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. "Coleman, now!" Ellis called from the transport ramp. Caught between worlds, between duty and desire, Joe clutched the crystal heartlight and made his choice. 3 months passed. Earth military headquarters buzzed with activity as officers moved between stations, monitoring the ongoing negotiations with both Lyrians and Kelvins. The information about communication shielding had given Earth forces a crucial advantage, allowing them to push the Kelvin fleet back from Helios 9. In a small conference room, Joe Coleman sat straight-backed in his uniform, the crystal heart light hanging from a chain around his neck. Across from him, Admiral Peter Scott reviewed his proposal one final time. "You understand the risks of returning to Helios 9, Sergeant Coleman?" the Admiral asked. "The situation remains unstable." "Yes, sir," Joe replied. "But the potential benefits outweigh the risks. A joint Earth-Lyrian research facility could develop technologies that benefit both our peoples." Admiral Scott nodded slowly. "Your work with the Lyrian researcher, Naya, was it, already proved valuable. The Kelhara shielding technology has saved countless lives." Joe's hand unconsciously moved to the crystal at his neck. "She deserves the credit, sir. I was just the messenger." "And yet you volunteered to be our diplomatic liaison," Scott observed. "Most soldiers would prefer a posting closer to home after what you've been through." Joe met the Admiral's gaze. "Helios 9 has become important to me, sir." A knowing smile crossed the Admiral's face. "So I see. Very well, Sergeant. Your request is approved. You'll accompany the diplomatic team departing next week." "Thank you, sir," Joe said, relief washing over him. After the meeting, Joe headed to the research wing where Dr. Laura Walsh, a xenobotanist, was studying the samples he had brought back from Helios 9. "Ah, Joe. Just in time," she said as he entered her lab. "I've been analyzing the communication patterns in the Kelhara plant. Fascinating stuff." Joe smiled. During his time on Earth, he had spent hours with Dr. Walsh not just discussing the scientific properties of Lyrian plants, but also learning about Lyrian cultural expressions. "Any new insights?" he asked. "Several," she replied, bringing up displays showing molecular structures. "But I think you're more interested in this." She handed him a small box. "It's ready." Joe opened it carefully. Inside was a pendant made from Earth materials but crafted in Lyrian style. Small blue crystals arranged in a pattern that matched the markings on Naya's skin. "It's perfect," Joe said. "And you're sure about the meaning?" Dr. Walsh nodded. "Based on everything you've told me, this design represents the Lyrian symbol for eternal connection, their equivalent of our yes to a proposal." Joe closed the box carefully. "I hope I don't mess up the ritual." "You've practiced enough," Dr. Walsh assured him. "Just remember the 3 steps. Present the gift, speak the words, complete the joining. Gesture." The week passed quickly. Soon Joe found himself aboard a transport ship heading back to Helios 9. As they approached the planet, he stared out the viewport, searching for the familiar landscape below. The human outpost had been rebuilt, larger than before. Nearby, the Lyrian research facility had expanded as well. Between them, a new structure was under construction, the joint Earth-Lyrian research center that would be his home for the foreseeable future. After landing, Joe waited impatiently as the diplomatic team was welcomed by Lyrian officials. He scanned the gathering, looking for a familiar lavender glow. "She is not here," came a voice beside him. Joe turned to find Vax standing there, his green-tinged skin patterns more complex than Joe remembered. "Where is she?" Joe asked, his heart sinking. "At the research center." "She would not come." Vax's expression was unreadable. "She believes you left without answering her declaration." Joe touched the crystal at his neck. "I didn't have time to respond properly. Everything happened so fast." Vax studied him. "And now? Have you come with an answer?" "Yes," Joe said firmly. "If she'll see me." Vax seemed to consider this. Finally, he nodded. "I will take you to her." They traveled in silence to the research facility. Inside, Vax led Joe to a new section filled with Kelhara plants at various growth stages. In the center of the room, Naya worked alone, her back to the door. "Sister," Vax called softly, "you have a visitor." Naya turned, and her skin immediately flashed through multiple colors: surprise, joy, uncertainty, and others Joe couldn't identify. She stood frozen, her large eyes fixed on him for the first time without looking away. "I will leave you two alone," Vax said, retreating from the room. For a moment, neither spoke. Joe took in the sight of her, unchanged, yet somehow different. Her markings seemed more defined, her presence stronger. "You came back," Naya finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. Joe stepped forward. "I'm sorry I couldn't answer you properly before I left." He touched the crystal heartlight. "I've carried this with me every day." Naya's skin pulsed gently. "Many things have changed since you left. The Lyrian Council now works with your people. Some say I helped cause this by sharing our research." "You helped save lives," Joe said, "both human and Lyrian." "And you?" she asked. "Why have you returned to Helios 9? Joe took a deep breath. "I've been assigned as the liaison for the new joint research facility. But that's not the only reason I came back." He removed the small box from his pocket and opened it, revealing the pendant he had brought from Earth. Following the ritual Dr. Walsh had taught him, he held it out with both hands. "On Earth," he began, "when someone offers their heart, tradition says we answer in kind." He switched to carefully practiced Lyrian, the words flowing from memory. "Me vor la shen talari vex nominar." Naya's eyes widened, her skin glowing brighter than Joe had ever seen. "You learned the acceptance phrase," she whispered in English. Joe nodded. "I also learned this." He completed the ritual by making the Lyrian joining gesture, crossing his wrists and slowly extending his hands toward her. With trembling hands, Naya took the pendant and completed the gesture, her fingers intertwining with his. The touch sent that familiar electric current through him, stronger than before. "I never thought," she began, her voice catching. "Neither did I," Joe said softly. "But some things are worth crossing worlds for." Later that day, they walked together on a hillside, overlooking the construction of the new joint facility. The twin moons of Helios 9 were visible in the afternoon sky, pale against the blue. "Admiral Scott has approved your appointment as lead botanical researcher," Joe told her. "We'll be working together officially." Naya's skin rippled with happiness. "And unofficially?" Joe smiled and took a small device from his pocket. "I brought something else from Earth." He activated it and soft music filled the air, the same classical guitar pieces he had first shared with her months ago. "On Earth, we have a tradition called dancing," he said, holding out his hand. "Will you try it with me?" Naya took his hand, and Joe gently pulled her close, showing her how to sway with the music. At first, her movements were awkward, but soon, they found a rhythm together. As they danced on the hillside, Naya's skin began to glow brighter, the natural luminescence that indicated joy in her species. Joe had learned that this reaction couldn't be controlled or faked. It was a true expression of Lyrian emotion. "Your light is beautiful," he said softly. "It responds to happiness," she explained. "My grandmother says she has never seen anyone glow so brightly as I do when you are near." Below them, humans and Lyrians worked side by side on the new facility. What had begun as a simple research project between two individuals had grown into something much larger, a bridge between worlds. 1 year later, a formal ceremony marked the opening of the first official human-Lyrian cultural exchange program. As the founders of the initiative, Joe and Naya stood together, their relationship a living symbol of successful cooperation. The admiral who had approved Joe's return presented them with a special commendation. "Your work has opened a new chapter in interspecies relations," he announced to the gathered crowd. After the ceremony, Elder Mira approached them. "When I pushed my granddaughter toward you that day," she said to Joe, "I did not know if I was being wise or foolish. Now I see it was neither. It was simply necessary." "Thank you for your wisdom," Joe replied, having learned enough Lyrian culture to know the appropriate response. That evening, Joe and Naya returned to their hillside, now a special place for them. The Kelhara flowers grew thick there, their blue petals capturing the moonlight. "Did you ever imagine this outcome when you first left those flowers at the outpost entrance?" Joe asked. Naya's skin flashed purple briefly, that familiar embarrassment. "I was too shy to speak to you directly. In our culture, gifts speak when words fail. Joe smiled. I'm glad I finally learned to understand what they were saying. As the twin moons rose higher, Joe and Naya stood together on the hillside. Two beings from different worlds who had found something precious and rare. A connection that transcended their differences and brought their worlds closer together. The Kelhara flowers glowed softly around them, heart lights in the darkness, eternal and unchanging, much like the love that had grown between a shy alien girl and a human soldier far from home.